Hi, this is Abby with Happy Little Mystic, and welcome back to your free self-paced tarot course. Today's lesson will be all about card number 5, the Hierophant. If you missed our first few lessons in the tarot deck, I will place the playlist link in the description box below. And if you're following along with our Happy Little Mystic tarot workbook, you can open up to the Major Arcana section, and you will find a place to list all the information needed to fully understand the Hierophant. Okay, let's get started. So the first thing we'll notice when we look at the Hierophant is that he is seated in the center of the card. He is looking directly at us. So we'll notice that down in front here, we have two figures or two acolytes, seekers of wisdom, that are kneeling before the Hierophant. This is symbolizing the Hierophant passing on his knowledge to others. You'll notice if you look closely that both of these figures have the red rose flower print and the lily flower print. And we saw this earlier when we looked at the Magician card. So if we remember back to the Magician, these flowers and vines represented abundance and projects, any of those desires that we want to bring to life. So here, it's almost as if the Hierophant is passing on his knowledge so that the public here can then take that knowledge and create their desires. So there are a lot of similar colors that we've seen already in our deck. We have the red here, similar to that of the Magician and the Empress and the Emperor. That red is symbolizing passion, vitality, and being grounded. The white here is coming through, symbolizing clarity and purity. And then this gold here is symbolizing divine wisdom and spiritual enlightenment. You'll notice that the Hierophant is holding this cross here, and it's a triple cross. He also has 3 crosses here, and this triple cross represents the 3 realms. So we have the spiritual soul realm, the physical body, and then the mental mind. It can also be tied back to the Holy Trinity, the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. The keys down here at the very bottom of the Hierophant card, they're symbolizing access to hidden knowledge or spiritual wisdom. There's power and authority here, and the ability to unlock deeper meanings and truths. Our pillars are showing up again, similar to those in the High Priestess. So these 2 columns are representing duality and balance, and this foundation and support, connecting the heavens to the earth. And we'll talk a little bit more about how the High Priestess connects very closely to the Hierophant later on in our connection section. The Hierophant's crown here is symbolizing that spiritual authority. He's very grand and he's seated above the people. So if you're following along in our workbook, we'll go over to the Zodiac signs section. And the Hierophant is related to the planet of Venus, love and relationships. And Venus is the ruler of Taurus. So the zodiac sign associated with the Hierophant is Taurus, the bull. And Taurus stands for being traditional, grounded, perhaps rigid, spiritual, and structured. If you ask a yes, no, or maybe question and the Hierophant shows up, the answer is yes, but you should seek guidance and follow a tried and true path. And this is interesting because similar to the Emperor, he was a yes, but you should find structure and balance and stability first. Make sure you have that solid foundation. The Hierophant is saying yes, however, make sure that you seek guidance and follow something that you know works. So you're not really thinking outside the box too much with this one. So again, if the Hierophant shows up for a yes or no question, the answer is yes, but seek that guidance and follow the tried and true path. Don't think too much outside of the box. If the Hierophant shows up in a reading in the upright position, the keywords are going to be teacher, tradition. The Hierophant's acting as a bridge between the spirit and the material world. The Hierophant also indicates that you may be ready to learn something new, or perhaps you're ready to teach depending on how much you already know. Maybe it's your time to step up and be the Hierophant in front of the people. The overall big picture or general meaning for the Hierophant is that the path of learning is never complete. You should remain open to new courses of study. And while you should honor tradition, you should also form your own unique set of beliefs and rituals. So remembering back to the Fool's journey, when he met the Hierophant, he was asked to find answers from traditions and spiritual sources. But the Hierophant is also encouraging us to form our own unique beliefs and rituals. So find what works for you. Go back to the traditions, read through the spiritual sources, and then take those and make them your own. If the Hierophant shows up in a career or finance reading, the advice here is to take that traditional career path or perhaps move up the ladder of success in a traditional way. Perhaps you're becoming a teacher in your field of work, or you're going back to school or studying to further your career. If the Hierophant shows up during a love or romance reading, again, this is going back to that traditional path of love. So marriage. It could also indicate that you're learning from one another in your relationships, knowing that the Hierophant is all about teaching and learning. In the other section, I have noted that if the Hierophant shows up, it's a time to study and or teach and share your wisdom. This is a sure sign that there's more for you to know and that learning is a constant growth and evolution. It helps us evolve, and there's also a time to share what we've learned. Sometimes sharing what we've learned actually helps us better understand and evolve even further. So moving on to the numerology section of our workbook, the Hierophant is number 5. And 5 in numerology typically stands for conflict, struggle, and challenges, but therefore it can also stand for transformation and personal growth. So with this number 5 showing up here, we may lean on spiritual sources or go back to traditions when we are facing conflict and struggle. We may lean on those things to help us transform and grow personally. The number 5 can also indicate freedom, adventure, and change. There's a curiosity and excitement and adaptability to the number 5, which goes perfectly with the spiritual wisdom here, that curiosity and learning to adapt, create what works for us, the rituals, the beliefs that we choose to keep. I also like how the number 5 does indicate change, because quite often we can get stuck in our own traditions or outdated beliefs. And it's almost asking us to learn more, never stop learning different ways of thinking to better ourselves, and then find what really resonates with us. It's not necessarily a card to say that this is the one right way and this is what you must believe in to fully evolve and understand. It's reminding us that there are lots of different paths and beliefs out there that we have access to. So this number 5 invites us to adapt and be curious and be free, make the changes necessary. So if the Hierophant shows up in the reverse and you're choosing to read reversals, this could indicate that you have very rigid beliefs. Maybe you're refusing to learn, in which case the advice is to stay open. This may be a red flag to yourself or your client that you've been stuck in your ways for too long, and it's time to look at something from a different perspective. The Hierophant in reverse could also indicate a detour in your spiritual path. And the advice here is to try to have that open mind. So if something doesn't feel right, listen to that. Listen to that impression that you have. Moving on over to the connections with other cards section in our workbook. So far, the Hierophant can be connected with each of the cards we've already discussed in the tarot. So starting with the Magician, several similarities with the coloring, the red robes, the white, the gold is showing up here. And as we mentioned earlier, the lilies and the red roses being present here on these figures, listening to the Hierophant. There's also a connection to the High Priestess here. They're both showing us this near constant communication with the divine. Their columns are reaching up to the sky and grounded deep into the earth. They're both seated in a similar fashion between the pillars. However, the Hierophant is communicating with the divine by studying and following traditions and rituals, while the High Priestess is all about intuition and going within for the answers. So they're both able to communicate with the divine, but in those separate ways. Interesting. And then we've seen how the Hierophant has very similar colors, again, with the red and the gold being present with the Empress and the Emperor. Okay, and now to compare the Hierophant with our other decks. So I have Radley Valentine's Angel Tarot cards. And in that deck, the Hierophant is known as Unity and is represented by Archangel Sandalphon. It says traditional viewpoints or methods, spiritual organizations, and seek out mentors and like-minded friends. I like how the Hierophant here is sitting not on a throne, but in a forest, in a very comfortable position, as if he's finding that spiritual guidance in the forest on his own. I also like how there's different symbols here depicting different beliefs and ideas. So it's not saying that just one belief is the ruler or what we should all believe in. Almost these bubbles of thoughts here floating. It looks as though Archangel Sandalphon is deep in thought, very much tuning in to the higher realm, that spiritual realm. Our next card comes from Riley Valentine's Guardian Angel Messages Tarot. And what's fun about this is that the image depicted here is actually for the Hierophant card, number 5. And he calls it the Wise Counselor. Right away, I noticed that in both of his decks, he has these symbols showing up on her cape here, very similar to what is in each of these bubbles. So not saying that one spiritual belief or religion is better than another, but just a way of connecting to the divine. She almost looks as if she's floating. She's hovering above the land, above the earth here. I also like in this deck how each of the cards is shown using what a typical person might look like. So this does look like a guardian angel who is living among us. The keywords here we have are belonging, learning, and traditions. So when these cards show up, we're being reminded that we should seek counsel from others. Very nice. And then last, I have our Wild Reflections deck. Again, this is a new deck to me, but I love how much it ties into nature. So our Hierophant here is very different than the other depictions that we have. He's in nature, and instead of showing that connection to the higher realms of, spiritual, the divine, he's finding it through animals, and I absolutely love that. I love how the Hierophant here is connecting with this larger than life animal. He's not afraid. He understands that this is their land, and he's learning from them, showing that respect to the original traditions and ways of life. It also is symbolizing that passing on of knowledge that we had here in our more traditional card. Very nice. Okay, so these are the cards I have to show you today for the Hierophant. And in our next lesson, we'll be learning all about card number 6, the Lovers. And as I mentioned earlier in our Fool's Journey story, some of the cards in the Rider-Waite-Smith deck do have images that I'm not allowed to show on YouTube due to their standards. So I will have to cover them with the blue tape. However, we should be able to still read the symbols as needed. And that's all I have for today. Thanks so much for joining me, and I'll see you in the next one.